Okay, welcome to today's lecture on one of the most fascinating topics in critical thinking, magic and mysticism, and basically why intelligent people continue to believe in phenomena that really have no scientific basis. So let me start with a question that might interest you. Who amongst you wouldn't want an easy path to become a millionaire? Okay, so um, there's been an offer on a table for years that could make that dream come true. There's a foundation that's offered $1 million to anyone who can demonstrate under controlled scientific conditions that you can detect a so-called human energy field. All you have to do is, while blindfolded, you detect which of a person's hand is extended by sensing their energy field from about 3 inches away. That's it. So here's the fascinating part. Despite thousands of practitioners of something called therapeutic touch, Reiki, things like that, claiming they can do exactly this every day in their professional practice, no one has ever claimed this prize. So, as you can see on your screen, throughout human history, our thirst for knowledge has been driven by the struggle to survive in really often harsh, unpredictable conditions. We've developed sophisticated means of survival, like tracking prey, defending against predators, planting crops, navigating by the stars, a lot of human ingenuity for survival. But alongside this progress, there's been an enduring belief in magic, superstition, and magical beliefs provide a false sense of control for people over aspects of our world that are threatening, that we don't understand. And when genuine understanding, when genuine mastery kind of eludes us, it's comforting for people to believe that we possess knowledge and power in some way. And one way is through magic. But magical thinking isn't harmless, right? There is a danger to it. So there's three key dangers that we're going to talk about. First is that it offers a false hope. Okay, so when we cling to superstitions, we're holding on to something that really has no keys to survival, no keys to progress, and we're investing our energy and hope into something that can't actually help us. Second, and perhaps more dangerously, strong beliefs in the supernatural can really blind us to reality when it does become understood. So we might reject effective treatments, effective solutions because they conflict with magical beliefs. And third, there's what we call the gateway effect. So there's belief in when you believe in one supernatural phenomena, it opens the doors to others. Okay, so once a person kind of partly abandons reality, accommodating additional magical beliefs becomes easier, and it creates sort of a slippery slope away from evidence-based thinking. So the real danger lies not in, sort of, these fleeting magical thoughts or believing in magic or superstition, period, but in allowing those beliefs to inhibit our thinking, to inhibit our quest to understand the world. So let's look at how this plays out in real life. So it might seem childish, but it's surprising how often we choose to believe in something simply because we wish it were true. Okay, so wishful thinking makes the world more interesting, makes it more entertaining, less threatening. I mean, who wouldn't want to believe in a more magical universe? I'm watching Harry Potter right now, and I wish the world was like that in a lot of ways. Okay. So pseudoscientists have really mastered the art of selling wishful thinking, and we all have wishful thinking to some degree. So through like a mixture of sense and nonsense, pseudoscientists they really know how to appeal to that side of us, and they generate large followings by appealing to what people want to believe rather than what the evidence actually supports. And this is how cults are created. This is how social media influencers sell crappy products, things like this. They're good at that sort of marketing. Okay. And that's different than a religion. Okay. And magic and religion are not the same thing. a good religion promotes critical thinking and so on. There might be that leap in logic, belief in the supernatural, but that's different than magical thinking or wishful thinking. Okay, so this is not a criticism of religion, at least not good religion, but there are certainly, uh, I guess you could say, pseudoscience religions that that take advantage of our desires for this magical world where we can control things around us. And that's very different than religion itself. Okay. So vitalistic energy. Okay, so this brings us to probably one of the most pervasive forms of magical thinking nowadays, especially in the alternative medicine world. So the belief in these mysterious, undetectable forms of energy. So many pseudoscientists claim that these energies flow through our bodies and can be detected, can be diagnosed, can be manipulated by the practitioners of these different things like Reiki and so on. But despite decades of research, there's no scientific evidence whatsoever that show that these energies exist or even hint that they exist or that humans can detect them, determine imbalances in them, change them. So where proponents really get trapped is in logical contradiction. So they attempt to rescue their beliefs by asserting that these energies exist in another realm. But, notice the problem. If energy can't interact with our physical universe enough to be detected by instruments, how can it interact with our bodies to cause disease or to be manipulated as a treatment by the practitioners? So it's a fundamental flaw in reasoning, and you can't have it both ways. Either the energy interacts with the physical world or it doesn't. So this brings me to one of my favorite stories in the history of science, the story of Emily Rosa, who she dealt a blow, I guess you could say, to believers in vitalistic energy. So she was a junior high student, and she designed a really good test of therapeutic touches, basic assumption that practitioners can detect human energy fields. And her method was really brilliant, but simple. All she did was she blindfolded the practitioners and asked them to detect which hand was extended towards them under, controlled laboratory conditions. So each participant made 10 attempts with Emily telling them they're going to be able to do this, and them saying that they could easily do it. They were all confident. Okay, so the procedure was fully described in advance. There's no surprises, but the accuracy was only, I think it was 47%, which is slightly less good than just guessing, just random chance. Okay, random chance would have been 50%. So the practitioners averaged 4.4 answers out of 10, so 44%, which again is worse than random testing. So in 1998, Emily was 11, and she became the youngest person ever to publish a paper in the Journal of the American Medical Association, which was a big deal. So think about what this means. If these practitioners can't even detect the presence or the absence of the energy field that they claim to work with, they certainly can't diagnose illness based on it or treat disease by manipulating it. So now let's explore the psychological mechanisms behind superstitious beliefs and how they develop in the first place. So the answer really comes from behavioral learning theory. So as the slide explains, behavioral learning theorists first use the term superstition to explain how exotic rituals develop. So when behavior is followed by reinforcement, the chance of that behavior occurring again increases. But what happens when we receive reinforcement randomly, which often occurs in everyday life? Okay, so B.F. Skinner, which is the big name in behaviorism, or one of the big names, observed that eccentric or weird behaviors often develop without intentional reinforcement. So he did this experiment where he put a pigeon in a cage and gave it food pellets at random intervals. And if the pigeon happened to be spinning in a circle when the food arrived or pecking at something, that behavior gets accidentally reinforced. So the pigeon would begin to spin around or peck this one part of the cage more often, increasing the chance that the next random food delivery would coincide with that behavior. And over time, the behavior becomes more firmly established, even though there's no real connection between spinning around and receiving food. So we develop superstitions exactly the same way. So let me walk you through 3 different examples. The rain dance example. So let's say you have a group suffering through a drought. They perform a dance and it begins to rain just purely by chance. So from then on, they dance during droughts. But here's the key insight. Every drought eventually ends, so the dance will always appear to work eventually. The second example is good luck charms. They work similarly. So the perception that like amulets bring good fortune it's confirmed by what we would call confirmation bias. We actively search for evidence to confirm what we believe. So you search for evidence of good fortune, and you disregard misfortunes. Okay, so we notice the hits, we ignore the misses. The third example, this creates opportunity for chance associations to reinforce almost any belief or behavior. Okay, so it gives birth to superstitions. Okay, so you might have your own examples, like a lucky shirt to wear for exams, or baseball players often have their lucky socks and they don't wash them. So a particular routine before important events, or specific behaviors you might avoid on important days. And these persist because they occasionally coincide with positive outcomes purely by chance and reinforce that behavior. So why do superstitions persist? Once superstitious beliefs are established, why do they persist even in the face of contradictory evidence? So we can understand this by understanding the different patterns of reinforcement. When reinforcement follows behavior, every time it occurs, people learn quickly. But they also stop the behavior quickly when the reward ceases. That's called extinction. And it's easy to see that the connection has been broken. Okay, they've forgotten the behavior. But if you have intermittent schedules of reinforcement, where reinforcement only comes every so often and you don't know when to expect it, it creates behavior that extinguishes, that goes extinct, that's forgotten much more slowly. So here's how this would apply to alternative medicine, for example. If someone tries a homeopathic remedy and recovers immediately, then they'll say it was because of the remedy. The next time they use it, it may not work, and it only works occasionally by chance, which creates that variable intermittent reinforcement schedule, solidifies their belief. Okay. Variable schedules make people presume that there's still a chance of success the next time. It's the same reason why we gamble. You know, you think, okay, this time I lost, but next time. It's the most addictive way to get reinforcement. So they experience a series of failures, but as long as it keeps getting reinforced, then they'll stick with it. They would have to experience a long series of failure before that behavior begins to go extinct, begins to extinguish, begins to be forgotten. Okay, so this explains why testimonials really are worthless evidence. It's impossible to tell whether superstitious learning has occurred in any individual case, and that's why the people believe what they believe. So only well-controlled scientific experiments can rule out these alternative explanations. And sometimes also, like, going back to homeopathic remedies example, some homeopathic remedies work and are backed by science. And so maybe you have success with that one, and then that reinforces your belief that they all work. So like oregano, for instance, they've done the research that's shown that it does kill bacteria, and to the point where, like, in farming, they will use oregano in, like, the chicken houses and so on in order to sterilize them. Pseudoscientists often try to legitimize their claims by misusing genuine scientific concepts. So let me address the 3 most common tactics. First, the anything is possible fallacy. So pseudoscientists use these complex scientific theories like relativity and quantum mechanics to argue that anything is possible. So reality is certainly complex, okay, but science actually constrains what's possible by revealing the laws of nature, natural laws. So the second one is the misunderstood genius claims. So many claim to be these persecuted geniuses that have brilliant ideas that aren't accepted because they're ahead of their time. So they didn't accept Newton, they didn't accept Einstein, right? But Carl Sagan noted that they also didn't accept, and they laughed at Bozo the Clown too, right? So most people are not persecuted geniuses. Most people do not have brilliant ideas. Most people actually are idiots. And there are occasionally a few geniuses that people laugh at. But the majority of people that are doubted in this world, there's a good reason for it. Okay. So it's better to err on the side of caution. If everybody's saying this person's an idiot, chances are they are. So just be careful. Okay. Maybe they're not. But so be open to it, but also be critical thinkers that chances they're pretty high that this person really is an idiot. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind is that like Newton and Einstein and stuff, yes, they were criticized. But when they published evidence, the scientific community accepted them. Okay, so scientists were easily convinced by their evidence. It was just the rest of the world that was criticizing them. Okay. All right. So last slide. So it's really an interesting irony that kind of brings our discussion full circle. We live in this age of really incredible scientific, technological achievement, but mysticism and magic and superstition really appeals to more people than ever. So, and perhaps this is because to most of us, modern technology is really almost indistinguishable from magic. How many of you can explain how electricity's created, how computers operate, how the microwave even works, or cell phones, right? So we've become dependent on devices that work by what seems like magic to us. And without scientific literacy, we really can't distinguish real science from fantasy. This is one reason why people are believing in the flat earth theory again and so on. The education of people nowadays is so bad. It's so terrible. And yet we have all this amazing technology. It's this really weird juxtaposition, okay? So there's a great quote here. Learning the style of thinking and understanding the knowledge base of science is challenging. It encourages you to keep your mind open, but as the old saying goes, not so open that your brain falls out. Okay, so keep your mind open, not so open that your brain falls out. The solution isn't for everyone to become, a physicist, but we should be learning, we should be understanding things, and education actually helps us to keep our mind open, but also to be critical thinkers. So that really captures that essential balance we need. We need open-mindedness to consider new possibilities, but also skepticism so that we're demanding evidence. We need proper evidence. We need intellectual honesty to follow evidence wherever it leads us to, okay? So the goal isn't to eliminate wonder and mystery. There's genuine mysteries out there that science hasn't solved. Like what is consciousness, dark matter, the origin of life. These are real puzzles that are really more fascinating than the false mysteries of pseudoscience and magic and cult religions and so on that falls apart, or cult politics. It falls apart under careful examination. So science requires sophisticated thinking. It requires creativity, creative thought to consider all the possible explanations, but also tough-minded skepticism to sort through good theories and sort them out from the bad ones, right? So you have to have methodological rigor. You have to pay careful attention to evidence, and you have to be intellectually honest. You have to be honest with yourself about your beliefs and that you're not just believing something because it's wishful thinking, okay? But the alternative is really abandoning critical thought and embracing that wishful thinking. And that leads us further from the truth, not closer to it. So you have to be honest with yourself. So take some time to consider what your political beliefs are, what your religious beliefs are, what your beliefs about, the opposite sex are, relationships. And think about it scientifically. What is the truth? What does the science say about it? And am I right in believing it? All right, so as we've seen today, right, the mechanisms behind magical thinking are they're well understood. Recognizing them gives us power to think more clearly, gives us power to make better decisions. So extraordinary claims are still out there, but extraordinary claims that are true require extraordinary evidence. Don't believe something extraordinary until that evidence arises. So maintain your scientific skepticism while staying open to that sense of wonder about the mysteries of the world around us. Okay? So balance skepticism with openness. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. All right, so keep your mind open, but not so open that your brain falls out. See you next time.